Hello, everybody. All right, so for today, we are reading two stories. The first one in particular is Painless. This is by Dramatics. It is part of the Death and Doctor's Hub. The second one is Surgery, which is also by Dramatics and is from the Death and Doctor's Hub. I do want to preface by saying when it comes to this stuff, you don't want to hear about somebody basically like burying the whole entire pain that is in their like soul into who they are and losing their whole entire identity. This probably is not the story for you. And also, like the second one basically has the guy explaining how he's losing a part of himself, but he's also doing a surgery. Who knew? Besides that, um, I hope you guys have an amazing day, night, whatever it is, regardless if you decide to stay or not. So, you can cure me? The doctor rubbed his forehead, then rearranged his heavy plastic spectacles. They were supposed to compensate for his missing mask, but he found that all they really did was remind him of its absence. I'm sorry. Perhaps I did not explain myself correctly. As I said before, I cannot cure you of the pain or of anything else. But the woman sitting at the other side of his desk was in a pitiful state. Her skin, which might have been a once healthy light brown, was now pale and sallow, hanging loosely over protruding bones. Her dark eyes were clouded with pain of many different varieties. She sat slumped in the comfortable armchair the doctor reserved for his patients, as if trying to appear smaller than she really was. Despite its being a hot summer's day, she wore a heavy, long-sleeved blouse. The doctor didn't need to roll up those sleeves to tell why. That does not mean that I can't do anything to help you. I do require, however, that you understand the nature of the treatment you will receive. Okay? They never understood when he first explained it to them. The doctor did not blame them, for he wasn't truly sure he understood himself. Pain is chronic. Not just yours, but everyone's. It is a symptom of human existence. Something all must endure simply because we are. He could tell he wasn't getting through to her. Her eyes were darting around his small office, noticeably lingering on the high shelves containing his medical supplies. A glint of desire sparkled in the woman's otherwise dead eyes. She was barely paying attention to him at all now. He sighed and pressed on regardless. Humanity exists in a constant state of conflict. Nation against nation. Religion against religion. Person against person. It has always been thus, and always will be. Not only that, we are in a constant struggle with ourselves. Am I good enough? Is this the way I should be? Why does my body look this way? Why must I always suffer? As long as we live, we can never be at peace. It is antithetical to our very nature. Uh-huh. I think I get it. Yeah. I'm telling you all of this because you must understand what my treatment entails. I will have no unwilling or uninformed patients. I've seen where that leads. And he had. Stark images sparked to life in his mind, livid with shame. A brother dissecting and making puppets of the dead and living alike. A sister delivering pain and calling it healing. Another who. No. He will not be like them. I will not cure you. Not for a second to imagine that I will. What I can do, however, is put your pain to sleep. For the first time, he had her full attention. You can do that? That is about the only thing I can do for you. I can take your pain and bury it within you. I will take every possible cause for it, past, present, and future, and I will suffocate them. They will still be there, but you will no longer have any capacity to sense them. I won't feel anything? He could sense a hesitation in her voice. Good. Perhaps he could persuade her to forego this yet. You will feel nothing. And I mean this in the very broadest of terms. The treatment must be most comprehensive if it is to be successful. To bury pain, I must also bury everything else that is you, permanently. Something filled the woman's dark, empty eyes, and for a moment the doctor believed he had succeeded in turning her away. But then he realized it wasn't fear he saw there. It was surrender. Do it. Are you quite certain? I'm not sure you fully understand.
I understand. I said do it.
In the face of such determination, what else could he do? The woman lay strapped to the bed in his operating theater. The filthy rags she came into his office with replaced with clean medical scrubs. The chamber was bright and as clean as the scrubs, and empty but for the doctor and his patients.
Are you sure these straps are necessary?
She asked.
Quite certain, I'm afraid. Even if you are willing, your body may attempt to reject what I'm about to do to you. If it resists me, it may compromise the procedure, and I must have no interruptions.
Okay.
Are you going to start then?
I shall. I only need my tools.
With that, the doctor left the woman's side and strode to the large cabinet at the other side of the room. From its top shelf, he took a long plastic tray, which he began to fill. First came a series of delicate steel scalpels, arranging by decreasing size. After them were twice as many syringes, the smallest size of the doctor's fingernail, the largest as long as his index finger. The liquids within them were of the doctor's own making, and precious beyond measure. Last came an electrical device, a small metal sphere, connected to a number of electrodes. With the tray held in both hands, he returned to the woman.
Are you prepared to begin then? It's not too late to change your mind.
I told you before, I'm ready. This is what I want.
Very well. Applying preliminary anesthetic agent now.
Said agent was an ordinary one, only meant to numb the senses. The woman's breath grew shallow as she drifted into gentle unconsciousness. She almost seemed peaceful for a moment, until the doctor took a closer look at her lined face. There were far too many marks on it for a person so young. For a moment, he wished he had his brother to tell him what each of them meant. This was, as always, the diagnostician's specialization, not his. But his brother was long gone, vanished into parts unknown. His own knowledge would have to do. Where to begin? The doctor passed a gloved finger over the woman's forehead. The long line there seemed older than most of the others, and more pronounced. He closed his eyes for a moment. A memory line. Yes, those would be a reasonable place to begin with. He will move chronologically. The doctor took one of his smaller syringes and gently used it to pierce the woman's skin near the line. Almost immediately, it began to shimmer a faint bluish hue.
Application successful. Proceeding to erase.
He said to no one in particular. With that, he drew the second largest of his scalpels and carefully began to cut a line surrounding the line. As he did so, he could sense the residue of the memory which made this mark. Loud screaming, smashing glass, the sound of a child weeping. A terribly pronounced sting of pain followed by a longer, duller ache that never seemed to go away. The doctor felt no remorse at all as he buried the woman's parents forever, sentencing her memories of them to the deepest, darkest refuse pile her mind possessed. The twin lines at the sides of her mouth were a more ambiguous prospect. Two people were hidden in them, similar and not at the same time. One was tall, fair, charming. He moved with the confident grace of a fencer, and his eyes were the steel of his weapon. There was love of sorts there, somewhere. But as the scalpel did its work, the doctor could sense its corruption. It was a fleeting thing, and terribly one-sided. Its mark was erased. The line on the other side of the mouth belonged to a man as well. Or, rather, to the prospect of a man. For a moment, the doctor could almost imagine he saw the woman's belly swell, could hear the heartbeats of a child within. But no, it never did happen. The man's last memento died before it was born, and with it died something in the woman, too. She had buried it alone, telling no one. So, too, did the doctor bury it now. The hours passed, and so did the memories. One by one, the doctor buried them away, erasing the marks of a lifetime from the woman's face, if not from her soul. Her haggard visage seemed almost peaceful now, almost young. The doctor was momentarily tempted to leave things at that. She had a chance at a new life now, free from the scars of a past she did not deserve. He could leave things at that. But not with a clean conscience. Cleansed of her past, she might be. But she was still human. All the future held for her were more scars, more of the same. He had to go further, all the way. With a sigh, the doctor drew the second largest of his syringes. He worked hard and sacrificed much to obtain the gently bubbling liquid it held. While it was still in its syringe, it was clear as water. But when the doctor injected it into the back of the woman's neck, the skin surrounding it turned as black as tar. This stain began to rapidly spread, to prepare her for what the doctor knew had to be done. Scalpels in hand, he began removing her identity. He began with what he deemed simplest, or, at least, with what the woman had the least of. Ideology and faith went first. With some of his patients, the process of removing such things could be an arduous and time-consuming affair, but it appeared the sort of life the woman had led left her with very little time to worry about them. To banish them was a trifling victory. With those also went what passed for an education, her malnourished sense of curiosity, and the long desiccated corpse of her aspirations. The doctor couldn't help but note the lack of resistance on the woman's part. This was not unheard of, but it was a rarity. Her life must truly have been. No, he would consider this no further. If anything, this was confirmation he was doing the right thing. He persevered, moving to more difficult things. He could not remove her intellect entirely, for she would need some to continue to function, but he removed as much as he would dare. He knew its burden too well not to. Hers was a sharp thing, even as abused as it was, and the doctor had to be very careful in his cutting. Following that came other parts of her identity, her taste in food and fashion, the scents she enjoyed, and those she despised, her secret love of classical music, her odd patriotism, and her unexplained hatred of the color green. As the cuts went deeper, so did the things he removed, her gender identity, her sexual preferences, her perception of morality. More hours of labor, and a dozen of empty syringes later, and nothing was left from what once was the woman's inner world. She was a blank slate now, only as human as her body made her. That, too, needed fixing. At one point, the doctor deemed what came before sufficient to the prevention of all future pain. He had learned differently, however. People did not need to know anything about a person's inner world to hate them, to hurt them. For her to be truly free, the last step of the procedure had to be completed. The doctor removed the small electrical device from the plastic tray and connected its electrodes to the woman's thin arms. He then began erasing her body. The device hummed as he drew away the color of her skin, in her hair, in her eyes. The humming intensified as he drew out the shape of her nose, of her legs, of her hair. Bones crunched and twisted as he standardized her height and weight, and shape to what he deemed least intrusive. He had yet to perfect this part of the procedure. And finally, he rearranged her insides as well, removing those organs that might mark her as belonging to one sex or the other. The machine hummed and buzzed as he took away everything she once was, any potential she might have had, as he removed her humanity, bit by bit by bit by bit. When he was done, he woke it up. The creature, which now rose from the surgical bed, was of a height with the doctor. Its skin was a vaguely shiny gray. Its eyes the same. Its body was all straight lines and right angles, as precise as if measured by a ruler. Its mouth was a thin line, which opened as the creature quizzically viewed its surroundings. Then the doctor.
Hello. How do you feel? You?
The doctor resisted the urge to pull out his hair.
You? The entity you perceive yourself to be.
I. I.
Yes, you are you.
They often needed this explanation following the process. An unfortunate side effect. I feel nothing. I am nothing.
Yes?
I feel no pain.
No.
I am cured. You have cured me. Damnation, damnation! Not this again!
You're not cured! I simply buried your pain. Don't you understand?
You have cured me. You are the cure. You are the cure.
No! You imbecile creature! No! I did nothing. Nothing!
The same litany after every single procedure. They always said the same thing. It was intolerable. It was inexcusable.
No! No!
You are the cure, doctor.
No!
Screamed the anesthetologist, as a creature who once was a woman tried to embrace him.
No!
Thank you. A scream died in his throat. Suddenly powerless, he allowed the creature to wrap its arm around him. They were cold.
I am not the cure. There is no cure. I am but a humble physician.
How long has it been since he had flesh under his fingers?
Too long, that much was certain.
The cell was small.
Too small by far.
He did not much mind being alone.
That was not the issue. He had long since pulled out from himself those parts which required company. No, what bothered him was that he had nothing to do at all. His jailers would come and speak to him from time to time, certainly. But if he ever even suggested that he might improve them by means of his craft, he'd get all in a huff and leave. Silly, arrogant creatures, all of them. But what else could be expected of them? Truly, it was not their fault. They were simply very ill. A shame they would not let him cure them. Well, there wasn't much he could do about it at the moment. Might as well return to his work. He had laid down on his narrow bunk and covered himself with his robe. He was especially proud of the robe. His jailers had asked about it multiple times, but whenever he tried to explain it to them, he could tell they didn't believe him. But what was odd about a robe grafted from your own skin? Wasn't that what skin was for in the first place? But all they did was moan and complain about how it wasn't possible. How no one could remove so much skin from himself and still be alive. That no one had that much skin in the first place showed what they knew. Was he not a professional? It was so difficult getting people to show proper respect nowadays. His mind wandering again. What was he doing? Ah, yes. With long, well-trained fingers, he began digging into his abdomen. The flesh there was yielding. Properly porous, neatly organized. Now, where did he leave his bone saw? Oh, yes, the liver cavity. Reach about there, and... Ah! There it was. The thing was getting dull, and he had no idea where he was going to get a new one. Never mind that for now, he reminded himself. Next, the scalpels. The long ones were stashed within the bones of his pelvis, and he had a devil of a time getting them out of there. He really needed to find a better place for them, but his body only had so much room.
Any size increasing modification were to be easily noticed in his current surrounding. Perhaps a second cranial compartment, something to consider after he was finished with this procedure. He was forgetting something. He was certain of that. But what was it? He dug out his dwindling supply of adhesives from within his left eye socket. This required the temporary removal of the eye, which didn't make the task any easier. Still, when it was done, he had all he required to continue. Spreading his robe more evenly on his body and positioning the hem of it to support his neck, he began the operation proper. This one was going to be difficult. In order to reach that part of his brain that he wished to remove today, he'd have to bypass some rather essential segments. Failure to do so may result in severe harm to his memory, which would obviously be catastrophic, considering that he had no access to his old fallback brain anymore. Not that he would switch to that one anyway. He had modified this new one over a period of at least 3 decades, and he was not about to let all that work go to waste. No, he would simply need to be very careful. And that was all there was to it.
When it comes to a lady whose merit's not sound, but who makes you sniff and bray like a hound.
He hummed to himself as he used the bone saw to slowly remove the top of his skull. He wasn't quite sure where he'd learned this little ditty, but it soothed him. He hummed as he laid the saw to the side and brushed off the bone dust from his shoulders.
Kindness and beauty won't do you no good.
He reached for his long scalpel and maneuvered it around to that part of his brain he hated.
It will not matter if you're polite or rude.
Carefully, he dislodged it from the surrounding brain matter, hoping that his incisions were precise enough.
If success is what you wish and to gain a good health.
He finished with the scalpel and grabbed his tweezers, which he previously retrieved from a pocket of empty flesh around his ankles.
All you need to show her is a good bit of wealth.
A righteous pluck, and he was done. He stopped himself for a moment. What did he feel? He considered the notion of color. Did he have any preference? He remembered he was always oddly fond of yellow, and despised orange with all his heart. Strange, was it not? The two were so very similar to one another, after all. There was no sense in it. None at all. He remembered the day he finally found his solution, when he finally realized the source of his problems, of all their problems. This senseless preference, and all that was similar to them. Those were the key. So, did he still like yellow?
Yellow. Yellow. I don't care about yellow.
Capital! He had done it. It was gone. Another wretched part of him cleansed. Now the remnants of the life he had once possessed removed for all time. He was about to rise and perform a merry jig, but then he remembered the top half of his skull was still missing, and reconsidered. He carefully replaced it and applied the remnant of his adhesives to it, making sure to reapply it to the seams that firmly attached his mask to his face. It would not do for it to come off. Not ever. Getting distracted, he reminded himself, gathering his wits. He sat down and considered the new composition of his brain. What new insights did the removal of the offending segment allow him? First, he should revise the conclusion he had already reached, to figure out if those were still around. Yes. So, what did he know about life? That it needed curing, that was his first conclusion. The foundation of all that came after, and it remained as solid as ever. His siblings, fools as they were, thought him mad for this realization. They were created to preserve life, they claimed. But they were wrong. He knew the truth. He figured it all by himself. Life was a burden to those who carried its loathsome spark upon their souls. A bundle of contradicting impulses, cruel desires, and nonsensical emotions. Life was an ever-multiplying beast, and in his profession, such creatures only had one name. A surgeon he was, The surgeon, he was, and he was the only one to figure out what life was, what it was really about. It was so obvious, he thought, as he caressed the skin grafts that connected his face to his long beaked mask with slim, delicate fingers. Life was cancer. Life murdered the soul. It was his responsibility, as a medical professional and a moral being, to excise it. He remembered his first operation of the type. His patients screamed and moaned, for the anesthetologist was not there to assist him. As he cured them from their mortal coil, the suffering was lamentable but necessary. For once they died, their true soul was revealed. This is what made him confident of the righteousness of his cause. Once they rose again, cured and whole, all they desired was to help their fellows reach the same enlightenment. The soul, he found, only desired death for itself, not only desired death for itself, but for the world as well. To see the dead emancipate the living, that all made it worth it. All the mockery, all the hatred, all the loathing, all his solitude. He was the cure. He was not alone anymore. Two figures stood in his bare cell, staring down at him where he laid. The first was tall, gaunt, dark and pale. He knew him well. Lord, surgeon, it has been too long. The surgeon did not understand. Too long? We are never apart, Lord. I am the instrument of your will. I am with you always. His lord said nothing, only smiled. The surgeon turned his gaze to the other figure, a short, stooped man, who refused to look at him directly, even without his mask. The surgeon knew him well. Brother diagnostician? You are no brother of mine, beast! The man turned to his lord. Let's get this over with. His lord nodded, then turned to the surgeon once more. I have a task for you, most loyal servant. Your expertise is required. What do you desire, Lord? What can I do for one so mighty? The small death grinned, showing teeth like a row of tombstones. Why, dear surgeon, I have a world for you to cure.